What up, what up? Salvador Briggman here. Welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. This podcast is about two things, about sharing with you tactics that are designed to work, to get you results. And those tactics we kind of discovered through talking with and conversing with many different types of guests and creators. So I've done over, I believe it's now 300 episodes on this podcast. I've documented almost religiously, I would say, the things that work to get funding across the board, across many different categories, across gadgets and gizmos, across film and video, across, books, comic books, board games, tabletops, dance projects, film projects, all these different things we've tried to categorize and talk about on this podcast. And the reason is that it's all about commonalities. It's all about understanding what works in each category on Kickstarter, as well as delivering that to you so you can understand it in an easy to digest, fun format. And that's really, to me, what gets me so freaking passionate about this show, man, because we are right now unearthing crowdfunding gold. And I don't say that lightly. We are literally like archaeologists, you and me. We're excavating this territory and we're sharing with you all these little nuggets of gold, these gems that we find in the earth. And we're sharing that on this show. And again, this is something where this process, when I first got started in 2012, this was not something that was figured out. Even to this day, there are so many things that we are figuring out literally every single week when it comes to crowdfunding. And that's what I've designed my newsletters to do, obviously, is to share with you on a real-time basis the stuff that I'm figuring out every single week when it comes to this industry. And I'm still figuring out new things. And I've been in this industry for 8 years, right? I'm always discovering new ways to get projects funded. I'm always discovering new tools, new resources, new things that can help you guys. So first of all, I'm going to mention a link in a little bit if you want to learn more about that. But that being said, in today's episode, we're going to actually get into how this individual is able to attract more than $730,000 on Kickstarter for their project, and also attract more than 10,500 backers. So to me, not only is this a mega success, but it also shows you, I think, the power of branding, the power of how you can actually build a brand on Kickstarter, and as well use that to promote other projects, to get more of your products funded in the world, and to this kind of be like a lifelong journey in some ways. This creator actually has launched 9 different campaigns on Kickstarter. So I say this all the time on my YouTube channel, right, under my name, Salvador Briggman. I say this on my blog at crowdcrush.com. This can be an exercise where when you launch one campaign and it goes well, you can launch another and another and another. And even if the first one doesn't go well necessarily, you can still figure out what didn't go well, learn a little bit, maybe do a coaching call and kind of digest that and understand that, and then go and launch another campaign. So that's what the cool thing is about crowdfunding, and why I love it is you can always just keep coming back to the crowd. Once you've built it, you can keep coming back to it. It really is an asset. It's almost like a reservoir of water, a well that always can be filled time and time again, and that you can really just quench the thirst of your family for years and years to come once you make that investment of digging that initial well. So what I was going to say is that, first of all, if you want to get access to some of those cutting edge techniques and tips that I talk about, you can go to the link I'm about to mention. You can sign up for my Killer Crowdfunding Tips newsletter at the link crowdcrux.com/newsletter. Again, that link is crowdcrux.com/newsletter, crowdcrux.com/newsletter. In addition, I know there's a lot of information out there, and I try to put out a lot of good information when it comes to crowdfunding Kickstarter. But at the same time, I feel like there's a lot of obscurity, and there's a lot of people who are trying to teach different techniques that don't always necessarily work. And it can get difficult to figure out the good information from the bad information. It can almost be like overwhelming in a certain sense. And I'm one of those guys that I like things simple, man. I like things simple and easy. I don't need to overthink. I don't want to have to overcomplicate things. And that's why I put together this simple, easy to understand and digestible course for you that walks you step by step through how to launch a Kickstarter campaign. And if that sounds interesting to you, you can go to the link I'm about to mention and you can enroll in this free course, and you can start getting some emails from me that'll warm you up to how to smash your goal, how to launch one of these campaigns, and how to do it right. If that sounds interesting, go to this link I'm about to mention at crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. Again, that link is crowdcrux, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter. Just go to that link, crowdcrux.com/Kickstarter, and you can enroll there. You can start getting some access to some really great tips and insider information. That being said, let's dive into today's episode and discover how this individual was able to attract more than $730,000 from more than 10,000 backers on Kickstarter. It's coming up right after this. If you're worried about the fulfillment and shipping part of your Kickstarter campaign when it comes to getting out all those perks and rewards to your backers, rest assured, I've put together a complete Kickstarter fulfillment and shipping checklist for you, and it's free. This is sponsored by the folks at Fulfillrite, and they thought that you should have this checklist as part of your arsenal going into a crowdfunding campaign. If you want to get instant access to this checklist and it's free, you can go to fulfillrite.com/checklist. Again, that is fulfillrite.com/checklist. Fulfillrite.com/checklist. Just go to that link and you can download it immediately. Hey guys, welcome back to the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. We have a creator on the show who's launched multiple campaigns, and his current campaign has raised over $370,000, attracted more than 7,000 backers for Earth, a naturally beautiful engine building, hand management, and tableau building in 45 to 90 minutes. We have the creator here on the show. Conor, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Definitely, man. If we can get started, I mean, you have a really interesting background here. Can you just tell the listeners a bit about your experience with crowdfunding? And then we can also start to talk about this project.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, I don't know how far back you want to go, but my crowdfunding history, I guess, started in 2016 when I did my first project for Summit, the board game, which obviously went well. And that led to a second, third, fourth, fifth, all the way up to this being our ninth, if I remember right. There were a couple expansions we did in the middle there that we didn't use Kickstarter for. But yeah, will be our ninth crowdfunding.
And how has the company or how has your work grown since that first game that you launched in 2016?
Oh, it's crazy. In 2016, I was actually running a construction company full time and doing my board game stuff in the evenings. And that was pretty exhausting because I had a young family at the time and my poor wife was picking up most of the slack. So, yeah, as things progressed and as they improved for Inside Up Games, ended up going full time a few years later, about a year, no, 2 years after that, maybe. And then I've been doing it full time since then. And it's been great. It's been great to kind of grow with the community and the hobby and, develop this awesome group of backers and friends who've been supporting me and growing from campaign to campaign.
How did the people around you kind of react to that? Like you had been working in your career in construction and then you're now doing board games. Was that something that was kind of a surprise to people, or did they always just kind of naturally see you going down that path?
And I think it was a surprise to anyone who knew me in my construction role. I would deal with all
Yeah.
sorts of whether the lumber yards or the orders or the manufacturers, companies I've been dealing with for years who just saw me in that sort of managerial construction, ripped jeans, cut up hands type worker mentality. But then a lot of local support meant that I was carried on a lot of local television and newspapers and stuff like that for my first campaign, which meant, it was kind of everybody knew that my friends and family growing up knew that I was a big board game fan and played a lot on my own and had always been told that I should make a game because of how much I liked them. I mean, I just never really had time because I was so busy. But I remember being a little bit nervous and, about the idea of like everyone kind of, seeing you put yourself out there, ready to be ridiculed by the world. But I was met with so much support from everybody and from all of these construction friends as well who, really applauded me for, going for it, for, trying to do what you love. And it was really nice. I got lots of support and lots of really nice comments.
And what kind of role would you say that, this plays in your business? Because obviously, you guys have built up a community here and you keep coming back to Kickstarter. Is this to, attract new customers and new people? Is this to give the fans a way to participate in your launch? Why do you keep coming back to crowdfunding, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, it's a super fair question. I mean, for us, it's two or threefold. Primarily, it's a funding issue. I mean, it's always as much as I would like to have unending pockets of dumping my own money into things. It just comes down to like, okay, if we want to make this game and make this game the best it can be, and make it a real thing and available to people, then I'm going to need the help. And it's happened
Yeah.
each time. And then with that, backer feedback and testing and growth. And back in the day when I did stretch goals, all these things, to help always kind of improve the product and make it better. And it's a wonderful marketing tool. It's one of the best ways of kind of getting it out there, getting it direct to the consumer. Because unfortunately, from my experience, and not to cast any negative will on them, but for a lot of the retailers and distributors, they're just so bombarded by the pure number of board games being released every year that it can be very reactionary, and they're only kind of really interested in what the public's asking them for. They don't really
Mhm.
often have time to make a leap on someone they've seen or met or heard of. It really has to be a big splash, like Earth has created, obviously. And I've had
Yeah, yeah.
Amazing retailer backers and supporters, and then a lot have become friends over the years that have backed me right from the very first campaign, which is really funny. If any of your listeners want to go back and look at the Summit, the board game on Kickstarter, and you can see me in the opening video. I look about 20 years younger than I do now, and it's only been 6 years. But yeah, one of those reasons just being that that direct marketing. So when you're going right to the
Mm.
people, you're kind of developing and creating that hype and that desire and that interest.
Mhm, and to kinda add to that, I mean, I'm just blown away by the sheer quality as well of the number of board games released, right? So it's not like these are a bunch of
Yes.
really horrible games that are just trying to, be thrown down the throats of retailers. It's actually really high quality games as
Yeah,
well.
for sure, and like I say, like it's not a joke. When there are thousands of games coming out a year, retailers don't have the space to be able to stock all of these games. And when everybody believes that their game is the next best game, then retailers really need to be picky and choosy. So they got to kind of wait for these
Yeah,
games to be
yeah.
proven, which has been really nice. And it's I might be jumping ahead, but that's one of the things that is quite different on this campaign is the accessibility of a digital implementation of the games.
Yeah, I'd love to talk actually a little bit about Earth. So for those that are listening, maybe before we get into that, you can kind of just describe a bit about this project, how this relates to your other ones, and kinda get into that a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. So, yeah, so basically, of the 10 previous titles, 7 of them are my designs. Those are like the first 8 or so, and there was one other design in there. But after the first 4 or so, I started getting pitches from other designers who were looking for my company to publish their game. And at the time, it was still just me working for the company. My longtime friend, Joe Saliba, came in as an investor and supporter just because of finance, and he's been great, but it was basically just me on a day-to-day operations. And so for years, I kind of thought it was strange that games would be being pitched to me, just being one person. But we slowly opened that door and did our first couple outside designs, and then we got known as a company that did publish other designers' games. So Maxime Tardif, who is the designer of Earth, I had actually met back at Gen Con, maybe 2017, I think, when I think they were releasing Diver City maybe with their company, a French company out of Quebec, and I was releasing Summit to retail at that Gen Con. And we hit it off. My wife's a first language French speaker, and he's a first language French speaker. So I was able to converse with them, and you kind of had that local Canadian camaraderie at a massive US convention. So we hit it off back then and kind of kept in touch at conventions as we saw each other. And when he designed Earth, he approached me and a few other publishers that he knew because basically the company he was working for, they were all busy with their real day jobs. And they weren't like me, they hadn't taken the plunge. And when he pitched it to me,
Mm,
I immediately saw the appeal. Speaking very personally, when I design or publish a game, it's a game that I find fun. I have yet to market a game just because I'm like, oh, this will sell. I actually have to enjoy the game as well. And I truly enjoyed Earth. And one of the things about it, although there's a lot of stuff going on in the game, it's very straightforward. I've been able to play it and test it with my kids as well as my testing groups. And my kids are 8, 10, and 12. And it's just there's 4 simple actions, but everyone's involved. So there's a major benefit that the active player gets and a minor benefit that all the other players get. So it just keeps everybody kind of involved in the game. Take that as a mechanic that I do actually enjoy in my games. I like people having to think on their feet. But in this case, there isn't any. And it's funny, I think due to the last couple rough years that we've all had as a planet, I think we're all kind of needing a little bit more positivity than negativity lately. And I think it
mm.
really played into Earth for that little thing. Whereas in Earth, everyone's always being rewarded for their clever play and their smart choices, and they're always being given resources. And that's true for everybody at the table. And no one's able to kind of cut your legs out from under you, which means that yeah, it doesn't have any take that, but what it does have is it has so much positivity that you need to do the best you can with what you have. I mean, at the end of the day, you're not going to be sitting there complaining that you could have won if so and so hadn't done so and so. That's not going to happen in the game. It's okay. Here's a whole bunch of good stuff for everybody. Do the best you can with what you get. It's some stuff that I didn't even really, fully, I don't think, comprehend at the time. That positivity, I didn't really, put the two, ideas together until I was rewatching Ted Lasso and just realizing how much it spoke to people because of the positivity that the world is needing right now. And then I kind of saw it in the game too.
Yeah, and it's also, just to build on that, I think it's also a really interesting, sneaky way to involve your kids in a positive message,
Yeah, and it's
right? 'Cause if you tell them those things, they're gonna be like, "Eh, not interested. Let's go play a game," right?
It's true. That's very
But
true.
you actually built it into the
Yeah,
game.
and, I mean, sorry, to be fair, I don't wanna take any credit. Maxime built it into the game. So it was Maxime that
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
I did development work for him, but his design was very well thought out. He spent months on the balancing, and he shared all that information in those spreadsheets online as well, so anyone who's interested can kinda look into the nuts and bolts of how the game was created from a design point of view, which is really interesting. But yeah, that ended up working out really well, and to create the game kind of what it is, it does harness the beauty of
Mhm.
Earth and the natural synergies of living organisms. And then so when we were developing it and I was planning to publish it, I spent quite a long time trying to refine the look and feel of the game and how to kind of keep it as beautiful as possible. And we actually decided on real professional photography because all of this beauty is natural. There's no need to Photoshop it, to edit it, to tweak it, to fake it. It's just beautiful in its
Mhm.
own way. And there's just so many cards that will literally take your breath away as you're playing the game and say, like,
Yeah.
oh, this is just beautiful.
Yeah, love the artwork. It looks super cool. So one question here is, and this might be a dumb question, honestly, is, when it comes to you being a publisher, what sort of is your role? Is your role to market it? Is your role to create those marketing materials? What kind of is your role as a publisher once you have a designer that you like and you're working with?
Yeah, so I mean, speaking just for Inside Up Games, I can't speak for other publishers, obviously, but for us, it's everything from refining the game to trimming it down, making sure that you really have the best essence of the game, trimming off any unnecessary to kind of get the best product you can. And then once you've done that, all the marketing that goes into it, but also the publishing of it. So that means the actual deciding on what the quality of the card stock, the size of the cards you're going to use, what format you want to have things in, what the layout of the cards, the templates, all sorts of stuff like that, and then lining up the artist, the graphic design, paying for all of the fees associated with paying for all the photography, making sure all the licenses are in place, and then
Mm,
arranging and submitting all the files for pre-press for the manufacturing process, all your freights, your shipping, your fulfillment, your taxes. Yeah, that's
that's a
the
lot.
one
Yeah.
downside to publishing is that I've been so busy with it that I haven't had much time for my own designs, which kind of circles back to the first question you had, and then kind of how Internet of Games has changed and grown. And it's been good because last year I brought in an employee, Chris, to help me out because I just had so much going on. And then this January, I brought in two more employees, Caitlin and Jenna. So there's actually four of us now working with the company just because there's so much going on
Mm.
all the time.
Let me ask you a kind of a candid question. So you're obviously a super smart guy, right? What do you would you say when it comes to a creator? When does it make sense for them to run their own campaign versus partner with someone like you to get a product out there that they maybe couldn't, right? When do you think it makes sense in that way?
So first of all, I don't think I'm that smart, but that's very sweet. I think I'm very brave and not scared of anything. So I think that kind of helps. I don't know about the smarts, but I'll take it for now. The honest answer to that question is very straightforward. It comes down to what does that person want to do? Do you, in my case, do they want to be a game designer or do they want to be a publisher? Because those are very different things. And if you want to publish the game, and yes, that means in theory you could get more money directly in your pocket, then it is a completely different subset of skills and time and money that will be spent. Whereas if your goal is to design games, sell them to a publisher like me, and then make royalties off of them, and then spend your time designing more games to sell to more publishers to make more royalties. Those are two very different venues. And you can see that not really anyone that I'm that aware of does everything by themselves all the time. A lot of small to mid-sized successful publishers are publishing other people's games just because once you're publishing, you don't have the time that you had before to kind of
Mm.
develop and flush out these game design ideas. I have probably six games on my design table that are mine, and I probably have 12 that are submissions and a couple that have been signed. So I literally do not have the time to get back to my own designs.
Yeah, it really turns it into a business,
Hmm.
and you need to break out the spreadsheets and be very
Yeah,
coordinated, all that project management. So for you, in
yeah,
your
100%.
experience, you've done a bunch of these different campaigns. How do you feel like has Kickstarter has changed over the years, and how has crowdfunding changed in your opinion?
Oh, I think it's changed a lot. Like I said, like I joked about earlier, go back to my first campaign, look at who I was, how I was offering, and what I was selling, the price points, the quality of stuff. Like I worked really hard at the time, and I still work really, really hard. But look at what kind of was acceptable as a project. And back in 2016, it was just kind of the end of the here's my idea submissions of This is something I want to do. This is like a prototype I've made by myself at home. And this is the money I need to do all these different things. Please help me. Now it's much more of a, okay, here is a near finished looking product. Here is, we've spent a lot of money on the marketing, the design, the art. So it looks like a product you would pick up in the store. And I don't
Mhm.
necessarily think that that's a good change. I think it can kind of cut out new and up and coming people who are going to have to put a lot more capital forward to kind of bust into the market. Um, but I
Mhm.
mean, for a looks thing, it's an improvement. But I definitely think it's a hard market, and it can also be a lot more demanding time wise from backer expectations. So because there are so many
Mhm.
Kickstarter projects and so many different types of publishing companies or creators behind those projects, there's a wide gamut of backers that you will encounter. Everything from the amazing positive supporters to the really kind of caustic keyboard warriors, and it can be hard, and it is a lot of work to juggle. And that's been kind of the biggest adjustment for this campaign. Is this Earth has by far been our biggest success, our most successful Kickstarter.
Yeah, I mean, dude, this is huge. I mean, this is huge. You guys have passed the 7,000 backer level.
Yeah,
You had more than 1,400 comments on this. This is a monster. One of
yeah.
the deliberate choices I noticed was that, first of all, you're collecting shipping afterwards,
Hmm.
right after the campaign finishes. And one of the other questions I had was on your thoughts on stretch goals.
Yeah.
Could you just illuminate or share with the audience why you made those choices?
Yeah, so shipping afterwards is straightforward for a couple reasons for me personally. One is that the shipping can really dilute the funding goal. And realistically, you need the funding goal to be able to make the product. So when you have the shipping value going towards that, it can kind of mess on lower backer numbers on smaller campaigns. And attaching it afterwards is going to be a lot more straightforward and can be a lot more fair for the backers as well when you have accurate weight numbers for any kind of add-ons that they want to do. So because I've been around for so long, the number of people can add on our back catalog while they're pledging for the Earth campaign, and just the different permutations of potential combinations people could add and what that would do for the shipping calculations are kind of a little bit more than what the Kickstarter backend offers. Whereas that is
Mm,
done much better in a pledge manager. So we've been using CrowdOx for years, which is joined forces with BackerKit. Um, they can have a very much a breakdown, dimensions and weight based shipping. So that way it's actually more fair, where I can say, okay, these are the items this person's added. This does this to the weight and this to the size. Then this is the actual shipping price and the savings they get from, bundling things up together. So that's the shipping. As for stretch goals, stretch goals I like and I don't like. I like stretch goals on previous campaigns because the economies of scales is one of those things where you can, upgrade things in your game to make them better for everybody. And that's kind of how I always formatted my stretch goals in the past. The idea, I strongly dislike stretch goals that add content. I think it's kind of sneaky to say to someone, I'm going to sell you this game for $50. And then, if we make more money, then I'm going to add more things to the game and add more things to the game. It's like, well, is the game not incomplete then if you're selling it to me and we don't reach those things? Like, why don't those things exist already? So for me, it's always been about,
mhm.
increasing the quality of the card stock, or the engraving, or the custom dice, or whatever it could be to make the actual components better without trying to be like, oh, here's an add-on. And then a lot of it I find a little bit frustrating from the back end and from my knowledge is just looking at some of these massive campaigns and knowing that, okay, they've raised an extra $10,000 and they're adding a card to the game, and meanwhile I know that card is costing them less than a cent in their production costs. And just being like, okay,
Mm.
I understand that it's just about driving the dollars, but it also seems a little disingenuous to say, okay, here are the stretch goals we're giving you guys, when they don't necessarily correlate to the funding amounts, and those funding amounts are changing as the campaign progresses, which is why you see a lot of campaigns with stretch goals that are revealed as it goes, not all upfront, because they need to roll with whether the campaign
Mhm.
is a massive success or a mediocre success.
Just for a beginner as well, do you think you can just provide a slight amount of clarity as well on stretch goals as you're referring to them? So, for example, are these things that people unlock? Is it adding a new card to a game? Like you said, are there any variations of stretch goals that you've noticed specifically with Kickstarter?
To go way back, stretch goals is something that Kickstarter kind of took on directly because of board games. So board games are created stretch goals. They're the first ones to do it on Kickstarter. It was kind of adopted by other versions of Kickstarter. And it basically just means that, okay, I want to make, let's say, this board game, and this board game is going to cost me $30,000 to make. Once I raise $30,000, I can make the game. But what ends up happening is you still want to keep people excited and interested, and you hope that you're going to raise more than that if the game does well and sells well. So the idea with stretch goals was that, okay, if we made $35,000, well, that's $5,000 extra, and that also means that we're selling more units of that stock. So in theory, if I had sold 500 copies, well, to get to the next tier, maybe I've sold 600 copies. This is a bad example because the numbers are too small, but anyways, as you sell more, because of the economies of scale, as you buy more units, the per unit price is decreased. So you can buy more things at less of a cost, which means that the overall cost is driven down. So the stretch goals will then allow you to have more money disposable to kind of put back into the game. So the way our board game companies will use stretch goals is saying, okay, this is how much money we needed. When we get to this much money, that's going to allow us to do this. And when we get to this much money, it's going to allow us to do that. And there's all sorts of ways it's been done. It's as common as, like I say, adding elements to the game. Maybe once you reach X amount of dollars, well, now they'll include a solo variant to the game. Once they reach X amount of dollars, now they're going to include an extra promo pack of cards, or they're going to change the dice from
Mhm.
typical, pip dice with the little points on them to engraved numbered dice or special, graphic design dice. Or so it's basically a way of kind of blinging out or customizing your
Blinging out, I
games
love that.
with that kind of increased
Yeah.
revenue.
We should coin that phrase, I think. But yeah, so it sounds like, also for the people that are listening, those 2 things that we just mentioned with shipping and also stretch goals, these aren't built into the actual platform, right, on Kickstarter. So you're kind of doing this little bit of advanced, which is
That's
really
right.
unique and really interesting.
Yeah, and so there, I think I haven't used them, so I'm not even close to an expert on them. But I believe some of the other crowdfunding options are working that into their systems, where you can actually preset your stretch goals, so things are kind of unlocked and revealed at the time. Whereas the Kickstarter's backend system's a little bit more limited, but it's where my fan base has been for years, and it's a system that I know, so it's the one I'm still using.
100%. So, you like you said, this has been an amazing major campaign for you. Your community has come out. You're also connecting with new people. So this is super exciting, I think, in your company's history. And it's obviously your company's growing as well. For someone
Hmm.
who's just kind of getting started with their first or their second campaign, do you have any advice for them in today's kind of Kickstarter ecosystem? What works well or how they should approach a launch?
Yeah, so I mean, back in the day when I was doing all my research going into my first one, going through Jamie Stegmaier's Kickstarter lessons, which are all on free online. He has a fantastic crowdfunding book, Richard Bliss's podcast, Funding the Dream, and there are tons and tons of other podcasts such as yourself that kind of give people that information. And really, my biggest recommendation is listen to all those things. Right, you might not agree with them all; they might not have the information that you need, but it will all kind of come together and lead you in the right direction, because everyone else, this has been done before by a lot of people. It's unlikely that it's going to be unique to you. And then the biggest tip that Richard Bliss always said on his podcast was, when it comes to crowdfunding, it's never a funding problem, it's a crowd problem. Basically, to say that your biggest thing as a first time creator is going to be to build the crowd before you kickstart or GameFound or whatever system, Indiegogo, whatever you're going to use. It's get out there, get the game known, get it seen, get it played, get people excited about it, because people
Mhm.
are very much willing to spend money. We've seen that throughout the whole pandemic, that it hasn't dropped off. Board game sales have increased. People are willing to back things. They've been stuck inside their house forever. They're not traveling. They have more money to spend. So they're willing to spend it. But if they don't know about you, they don't know about your campaign, they're not going to find it. So you can't hope to
Yeah.
get lucky. You got to build that crowd.
Well said, well said. So in your experience here in having this new campaign where you weren't necessarily the creator, but you're the publisher, you've also created other games, you have IP. What to you is the most rewarding aspect of this experience? Is it when campaigns are funded? Is it when you're seeing sales? Is it when people are playing your games? Like, are there any specific experiences that come to mind where you're like, this is exactly why I quit my construction job, right? And why I'm doing this?
Actually, you know what the funny thing is? It's there. I didn't really think of it, but I do. I know the answer, and as weird as it is, it has nothing to do with the Kickstarter. When the Kickstarter explodes and does great, it's amazing. It feels really good, but I'm still like, it hasn't really hit home. The Kickstarter's not over, so it's not money in the bank yet. Anything can happen, and because I'm always kind of in work mode and like trying to make sure everything's organized and clear and open and honest and on schedule, that I'm just so busy with it. The part that's most rewarding to me is when I'm, at a convention and someone comes up to me and introduces themselves and tells me about an experience they had playing one of my games and how, it created either a story or an emotion or a feeling or a memory for them. And seeing that enjoyment, just the idea that there's people around the world, playing my game, whether I designed them or published them, they saw something that I created, they liked it, they brought it into their house, they took time to learn it with their family or friends, and they enjoyed it. And that is just such an amazing experience.
That's awesome, man. And having seeing a product in the wild or seeing someone use that is such a life changing experience, right? And knowing that other people are actually
Hmm.
other human beings are playing your game and making memories, right? So for this one, what do you feel like, or what do you hope are
Exactly.
the kinds of experiences that this game is going to foster? And just kind of curious about your thoughts on that.
And the funny thing and the truthful answer is, and Maxime and I have talked about this a fair bit, is we're not expecting this to blow up the way it did off of the bat. We knew the game was solid. We knew the game was very, very enjoyable. And we knew that once people played it, they would really like it. And that's true for a lot of our games. I'm still a small company and a lot of people haven't heard of us, even though we've been around for a while. But our biggest issue has just been, it's a very busy marketplace. And until we can get people to play our games, they won't know about it. So Maxim and I were very much ready for the campaign to do okay, for it to fund, and, and overfund by a bit, and then get the game into the wild. And then once people started playing it, for that love to really kind of explode. And
Mm.
what I wasn't prepared for was the idea that I had made prototypes up in advance and I had shipped them. One to Europe for my European publishing partners who want to do language localizations. Unfortunately, it was held up in German customs for over 2 weeks, which meant it missed a lot of deadlines that had to get to different publishers around the EU. The good part of that was that it kind of forced my hand into reaching out to a TTS, a tabletop simulator developer who can make a digital implementation of the game. And when he did that, it allowed me to not only show it to my European partners, but also to offer it free for people to play. And that allowed them to fall in love with the game now, as opposed to falling in love with the game in a year.
Mm.
And I think because of that ability, because of the visual appeal of the box cover, of the campaign, that it drove a lot of eyes, they were able to play it. And then it drove people to the Board Game Geek website, which is the largest website kind of information base in the world. And anyone to do with board games is involved in that website in some way. And they have a hotness, which kind of tracks what people are talking about the most. And Earth jumped onto there and then just kind of sat at the top of that list for about a week, just from all the hype and eyes it was drawing to the campaign. So, and kind of all of those things melted together to kind of make it such an impressive campaign.
Very exciting, man. Well, first of all, where can people go and learn more about the game Earth? Where can they discover that, see some of the beautiful artwork? Where can they go and check that out?
Yeah, so you can do a simple Google search for, Earth Kickstarter. You can go to our website, which is insideupgames.com. We're on all the social medias as Inside Up Games. The Kickstarter goes until March 8th, but then after that, we will have the Kickstarter linking and our website linking to Pledge Manager. So after the campaign is over, people can still pledge for a copy of the game and have it shipped when it's ready.
Awesome. And my final question for you is, do you have any final tips or parting words for some of the creators in the audience? People who have these ideas and they see what you're doing, like, this guy is incredible. This guy's insane, launching all these projects, going from construction to doing board game full time. Now he's bringing on employees. Like, it almost seems a little bit unattainable, right? Do you have any advice or words of encouragement for the
Yeah.
creators in the audience?
I mean, I guess for me, and it's not fair because it's been my own life experiences, but for me, it's like, what do you have to lose by trying, right? Worst case scenario, you fall on your face, on a crowdfunding platform, and like, yeah, that sucks, but a lot of people do it. A lot of people pick themselves up, try again, and then fund the second time. So it's one of those things where just kind of like, work up the courage to do it. Make sure you built up that crowd in advance. Reach out. Speaking personally, the board game, area the hobby is very, very open, and there's a lot of helpful, honest, nice people who will definitely share their experiences. And there's a lot of Kickstarter and Indiegogo forums out there where you can kind of go and ask your questions and grow. But yeah, just kind of get your idea out there, get it seen, get people excited about it, and just do it, because you don't really have that much to lose. Just make sure that you're conscious of everything you need to know going into it, all of the costs, all of the potential hiccups, and the contingency plans for those.
Well said. Well said. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Really appreciate it. Some great tips, and good luck with your remaining days here on Kickstarter.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast. My name is Salvador Briggman. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Crowdfunding Demystified podcast, whether you're listening on iTunes, listening on Spotify, YouTube, whatever it is, my friend. Thank you so much for tuning in. And in addition, when it comes to launching a campaign, one of the most consistent bits of feedback I've ever gotten is the fact that, man, this process is just so freaking confusing. It's so difficult to navigate. There are a lot of times when I'm launching a new product and it feels like I just have so much uncertainty. What the heck can I do? So that's really why I started my podcast, why I started my blog, crowdcrux.com, why I started my YouTube channel, all those things is to kind of help with that. And over time, I started to do one-on-one coaching calls. And what I noticed is that people just kept booking me for the next couple of months when it came to my calls. And it was kind of overwhelming, but it was also really interesting just to see a lot of the same faces. And what I realized was that there needs to be this hand-holding process when it comes to this style of marketing, when it comes to doing a new campaign, when it comes to really just going you from A to Z for launching a new Kickstarter campaign. And that led me to think very deeply about how I can make the biggest impact in your life when it comes to this process. And one of the things I'd like to talk about right now is what I've kind of come up with here, because I think that today's program, what I'm going to be talking about on today's outro here, can be really useful for you if you're trying to launch a new campaign and you feel a lot of uncertainty. You're trying to launch a new campaign, you have a lot of fear. You're trying to launch a new campaign and you just don't really know what you should do next. You just want to understand bit by bit all the different steps of the process. You want access to freshly minted tactics when it comes to getting crowdfunding results. You want to discover breakthrough strategies for launching an effective Kickstarter campaign. You want to discover some tactics you can use to even triple your funding, right? As well as get access to me personally and me to kind of give you feedback as well on all the different elements of your strategy, of your campaign, to give you direct feedback on things like your video, your script, all that kind of stuff. This program is designed to help you with this and to be at a very entry-level pace so that literally anyone can afford something like this, that you can get started. And again, this is something that's really been a core part of my brand. We do have premium services and premium offerings, and I would say that this is definitely, in my mind, a premium offering. However, we tried to bring it down at a price point that is realistic for you, an investment that anyone can make in themselves, in their campaign. And one of the things that is so important to me when it comes to this is not only the fact that it's going to get you results, not only the fact that it's going to take you from A to B very quickly, but it's also about you, man. It's also about leveling up your thinking. It's about leveling up the tactics you have access to, the things that you know. It's about leveling up your education. It's really about injecting a whole new level of inspiration. It's almost kind of like breathing life, a new sense of vitality into your campaign, into your project. And when you have someone on your side with the energy like me, man, and who is so freaking passionate, it kind of just naturally rubs off on you. And you start to see yourself smashing through goals and obstacles that you never imagined possible. And it's because you guys are really smart. You're at the top of your game in many ways in your career, but then you go off and you try and do a different project. And sometimes it can just seem like a nightmare. It can seem like so hard to move through certain fears. It can seem so difficult to just wrap your mind around certain processes. And I don't think it should be that way. I think that you need to have a trusted mentor or guide in your corner who's holding your hand every step of the way, as well as giving you access to the straightest path to success. And finally, giving you that renewed sense of motivation and vitality to push forward, to charge forward, and be excited about this new campaign that is coming out. So if this sounds like something that might be interesting to you, this is basically a VIP community that I would like to share with you. And you can learn more about the Kickstarter mentorship package, which will help you blow past all of your goals, set your project up for success, and smash your goal when you go live on Kickstarter. So go to this link I'm about to mention. You can learn more about this. You can go to crowdcrux.com/VIP. That link is crowdcrux.com/VIP, crowdcrux.com/VIP. I would love you to become a VIP member of my community, of the Crowdcrux community. I would love to be able to interact with you one-on-one, as well as give you advice, to give you feedback on your work, and also to walk you through some of my private teachings when it comes to launching a killer Kickstarter campaign. Thank you so much. My name is Salvador Briggman. Hope you had a great week. Give me a positive rating and review of this podcast, and I will see you next time.